Hey guys, Lumen02. Currently getting ready to do two replays of two separate games. Unfortunately, we did not go to sideboards, either due to time or because my opponent just didn't have a sideboard. I didn't feel like playing a sideboarded match. The format is 93-94 old school. However, we're playing this in free form, so for this version of the deck, which is the deck I'm playing right now, I'm playing 3 strip mines. 4 would be legal. As it is unrestricted in the format we're currently playing. The format of 93-94 we're currently playing. First hand only has 1 Mox Pearl, so I have to toss it back. This hand is risky, but when I see... I do keep it, but when I see the Abyss on top, I feel very comfortable. Regardless, the hand does buy a bit of time with Disenchant and Swords to Plowshare, so I think in the dark it's probably keepable, because I don't know what I'm going to be facing. Is it a good hand in retrospect? Not really, outside of knowing that I have the Abyss on top. So what I'm going to be facing is Jeskai aggro-control. So we see the Abyss, and we're like, okay, well that makes the hand a lot better. Because I know Strip Mine is unrestricted, I actually play out the City of Brass first, because I'd kind of like to get my opponent to Strip Mine it if they have it. They have a Black Lotus of their own first turn, and play on a Serendib, a Freet, and a Savannah Lions. I go ahead and cast Swords to Plowshares on the Savannah Lions because I want to resolve this Abyss and get a 2-for-1 value out of it. So even if they have Disenchant at this point and they blow up my Abyss, I'm going to have gotten at least a card out of it on the Serendib Freet, which feels pretty good. I don't cast my Time Walk here. I think the damage is actually going to be relevant because I figure they're a aggro burn control deck. So they're probably going to have like lightning bolts. If they're running stuff like Savannah Lions, I assume they probably have 4 of lightning bolt and like 4 of chain lightning. I go ahead and hit their red mana source here to try to keep them off of it because mana looks like it's probably their biggest issue in this deck. Because it does not appear they're running Cities of Brass, at least at this point. They may be. I draw Ancestral here. I don't have a way to protect it, so I end up doing it on upkeep to kind of feign that I have Power Sink and I want to tap them out from their turn. And regardless, if they appear to be the proactive deck in this matchup, if they're going to counter something, I'd prefer them to do it on their upkeep so they're not casting a spell on their turn. Did not draw extremely well off the Ancestral here. Matter of fact, you'll see this whole draw is kind of interesting. It's a very weird draw. I end up like drawing like 3 Disenchants in a row and then like 3 counter spells in a row. Have a very difficult time finding a Jameday Tome or Disrupting Scepter, which is generally speaking where I'd want to be at this point in the game. I do go ahead and blow up the Pearl and the Ruby with Disenchants because I think Disenchant's probably pretty bad in this matchup. Unless they're running Blood Moon, but it doesn't seem like they could be running Blood Moon very successfully based on what we've seen so far. Drawing a Brain Geyser, but I'm not going to cast that here because I don't want to get it counterspelled. They obviously drew Ancestral for the turn, found a Library of Alexandria. At this point, I'm willing to play around Power Sink and play out a Brain Geyser, but I don't want to take the incremental damage. Another big thing to note is the Swords to Plowshares play on the Mishra's Factory. 1, they sequenced it wrong, and 2, it was able to gain me essentially a Lightning Bolt back, so it kills 1 card in their deck if they're going to be using it for burn. Now, I'm in a kind of a bad place here because I've yet to find a draw engine in my deck, and they have an active library, which I cannot deal with right now, so I'm kind of hunting for either a Strip Mine or a Jameday Tome. Disrupting Scepter would be mildly interesting, but probably not good enough in the situation. So they continue to draw, but they're ditching Savannah Lions, so at least some of the cards they're drawing, the Abyss is making dead, and it's pretty apparent to me that either they've been very unlucky with their draws or they're not running any number of Disenchants, or they're running maybe too few. Disenchant is a hell of a card in this format. They cast out the Serendib Freet, which interests me because Mishra's Factory can't be activated to protect it against the Abyss. So here I end up going for a Fireball to face because I drew Balance for the turn, and I am going to balance here. I think that against what I'm facing right now, I'm going to want to get rid of these Cities of Brass, so losing them is not a huge deal here. Although I will say I possibly misplayed and should have just tapped another City of Brass. My concern was if they go Bolt plus Psionic Blast, I just lose the game. But I do have a lot of counters here, so I probably could have. I do go ahead and Swords to Plowshares this. Them Swords to Plowsharing their own threat, I think, is a fairly ineffectual play. It's better than not doing it, but it's not that impacting on the game because they're still going to discard the same amount of cards, which is really what I was after, is to get them off the library plan with Balance. And I thought it was actually worth the cost of discarding 2 of my lands. I think all in told, I did the math at one point, it was a 5 for 3, so essentially a 2-for-1 value still off of the Balance there. I do go ahead and counter Black Vice. That may seem speculative, but the way I'm going to win, and here you go, the way I'm going to win this game is going to be through getting to that many cards where that card is relevant, and I've already utilized 3 disenchants, so I don't want to bank on having to draw my last disenchant or my time spiral. I'm sorry, my time twister. So I go ahead and tome here, find a strip mine, which is great because they've gotten back up to 6 cards off of the balance, and I can get rid of the Library of Alexandria at this point. I'm not in a huge rush to get my own library online because I have the Jame Day Tome, and they don't appear to have any disenchants. I do go ahead and kill the lions with the Singleton Bolt in my deck. Tutor up Disrupting Scepter. Now this is a more interesting play. My opponent concedes here. There's 2 options here. So I could go for Disrupting... I think there's 2 viable options. I can go for Disrupting Scepter, or I can go for Mind Twist and just eat their whole hand. Now, what makes sense to me is that I go for Disrupting Scepter, and here's the reason why. So I could only win via 1 means right now, which is 2 Mishra's Factories in my deck. Because I've expent the Fireball and I've expent the Brain Geyser, so I can't mill them out or Fireball them without Time Twistering. So if I were to Mind Twist them here at some later point in the game, I'm going to be kind of obliged, likely, to utilize Time Twister to get back my win cons. So that said, I think this is the better play because Disrupting Scepter is a permanent that I won't have to draw later, and after I have done that, I can use it to attack their hand, unlike Mind Twist, which I would probably rather draw post-Time Twister to get my win conditions back. They go ahead and concede it here. I mean, they're at 7 minutes and 59 seconds. I'm actually above them on time, which is a rarity for the deck, but I think eventually, they're going to find that us throwing the book at them, so to speak, and the rod is going to get them well under control with the Abyss in play. So that was a game of Jeskai, or you white, red, burn, aggro-control versus the deck, 5-color control. The next game is actually something new that I haven't shown on my YouTube channel yet. It's a little bit more of an all-in deck. This deck can probably never beat Energy Flux, and for that reason it probably needs to splash white. But the deck is essentially stacks. Well, kind of. It's just a big mana artifact deck that runs Mishra's Workshop. So I have Relic Barrier turn 1. They play a Black Vice, which does nothing. I draw a Strip Mine, end up just activating the factory and attacking because I'm an aggro mud deck. They Time Twister here, which is kind of risky. They're going to get a little bit of incremental damage off the Vice. In real old school, Relic Barrier can turn off Vice. I'm just going to start casting threats. I go with Suchi because it can't get lightning bolted. They go ahead and Strip Mine my land. I go ahead and strip mine their land. I don't really care if they draw cards with Library of Alexandria. I would actually rather them tie up their mana drawing cards than actually playing relevant ones. So they do have the Bolt like we kind of expected, and they go ahead and bolt our Juggernaut there. At this point, we have enough mana to cast out the Tetravis, which is also 4/4 and beyond the range of Bolt. So we continue to just beat down and tap their Mox to tie up their mana. They do have a Disenchant here, which gets the Tetravis, and then they have a Swords to Plowshares. But in true Jamie Wakefield fashion, it's not the first fatty that kills you, it's the last one. And here is our next fatty in the form of Tetravis. Go ahead and Relic Barrier their land again, just to tie them down on mana. They play out a Serendib here. And I feel like I'm in a pretty decent spot here. I do want to draw more bombs. And there we go. This deck is just loaded with bombs because all it does is makes mana and cast big creatures for this format. So we get in there with Tetravis. They actually take the damage. What I end up doing here is playing out the Icy Manipulator, actually. So I can force them to deal with one more thing. Because Icy Manipulator essentially says Prodigal Sorcerer plus remove Lightning Bolt from your deck every turn because we're tapping the Serendib free. We lose our Mishra's Factory, which stinks. They play out a bunch of Lions here. Oddly enough, they attack. I don't get that play. We have a lethal attack regardless in air. They really, couldn't do much about it, evidently, because they lost the removal. So like I said, this deck is kind of based around the Wakefield principle of just casting fatties quickly. It's essentially a ramp deck that casts artifact fatties, which are some of the better ones in the format. And, trying to interact with them, can work, but generally speaking, there's so many of them that you're going to run out of interaction, which is kind of what you saw here. What does this deck fold to? Energy Flux, like every time. Deck cannot beat Energy Flux, realistically. Well, I guess it can with, Nevin Jarl's Disc. But that's not a hopeful game plan. If you see that card, pretty much game over. At least I think. I mean, you could try to Energy Flux through it. Or, I'm sorry, you could try to Nevin Yarrow's Disc through it, but if they get an untap with Energy Flux, they're probably going to win the game if they just sit back on interaction and let all your stuff die. Especially because Mishra's Factory can't pay for it. Now, that said, if you get the Tron, which this deck also runs the Tron lands online, and they don't strip mine you out of it, then, you can probably pay for it. So the deck's a lot more all-in. It's just a mud aggro deck. Very cool deck, but unfortunately we didn't play a boarded game, which stinks. And this deck obviously gets a lot better once you can play four of strip mines, which this deck does. It plays just a bunch of strip mines because the land taps for one, and it also has an awesome spell effect in destroying key lands. So, very cool game. Obviously played out much differently. Like, if I was playing the deck, I would have, strip mined the Library of Alexandria as soon as I could have because my game's going to go longer. But on a deck like this, you can actually play some aggro and just beat them up with flying 4/4s. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this double set of games, two vastly different decks. One, a tempo engine, i.e. this mud aggro deck, and then one, just a card advantage control engine, the deck. So, take care now, guys, and enjoy the games.